Welcome to the 10-minute series of videos related to competency-based programs. My name is Madeline Bazurgi from the Office of Academic Development at Dawson College, and I'm pleased to present Competency Analysis Documents for Better Program Design. One very important step in program design to develop a meaningful and coherent program is to thoroughly analyze each one of the competencies in the ministerial DV. Competency Analysis Documents, or CADs, are key to a common vision of the program and to align courses. It is a tool programs use to appropriate the ministerial DV. Let me explain. So why start with competency analysis documents? Let me give you the example in the social sciences. There's a competency called Analyze a Thematic Issue from a Multidisciplinary Perspective in the Social Sciences. Since it's a multidisciplinary competency, teachers from any social science discipline may offer a related course. It's open to all the social science disciplines except 101 and 201. Moreover, within a discipline, several courses may be offered. Perhaps geography would like to offer 2 courses and history another 3, but they all develop the same competency to analyze a thematic issue with a multidisciplinary perspective. On top of that, there may be several sections of one course. So the competency analysis documents is one of those tools used to ensure consistency and equity across disciplines and across course sections, because it will capture the program's interpretation and translation of the objectives and standards into learning outcomes. And these learning outcomes will inform all the different courses developing that same competency. Here's another example from the new 3D production and CGI program. The competency is contribute to the implementation of artistic direction. This may mean different things to different people. For example, Element 2, experience artistic possibilities. What does this mean? And how far does the program go with the learning activities that help students meet this objective? What essential knowledge, skills, and attitudes will they need? How many program hours will be allocated to develop this competency? The CADs capture the result of all these discussions. In designing a coherent, competency-based program, we begin by understanding its aims and goals and thoroughly analyzing the objectives and standards. We use the CADs and we encourage open communication and collaboration, thinking and acting like a program rather than in silos. The competency analysis documents invite us to focus on the real target of instruction, the competencies to be developed, rather than on disciplinary content. Here are more reasons for using CADs. They make clear the program's intentions in developing the competencies. They ensure a common interpretation of the objectives and standards, and make clear what students should be able to do when exercising those competencies. They help create a level playing field with respect to assessment, and they can serve to orient new teachers. The competency analysis document serves to capture the translation of competency to the language of learning. There are key components to a CAD that will be fleshed out later on in the presentation. They are the interpretation section, where you describe the competency and the language of the discipline or occupation, and provide examples of situations in which the competency is applied or exercised. Mastery level learning outcomes are written to describe what students will be able to do when exercising the competency at the level established in the ministerial DV. And finally, a key component is the section entitled Knowledge, Skills, and Attitudes, where faculty list the knowledge, skills, and attitudes students will need to exercise the competency at the mastery level. Note that CADs are student-centered. They are not focused on courses. They are focused on student competency and the knowledge, skills, and attitudes they need to develop to meet the learning outcomes. CADs are used early on in the program design process. So what happens to them once completed and they've served their purpose to inform the program matrix? The next step is to embark on course design. Once approved at the Board of Governors, the CADs are distributed to the departments that are part of the program. The home and contributing disciplines will work together to develop course design documents. Course design documents are similar to CADs but now contain course-related information. For the case of a one course, one competency model, the CADs and the course design document are almost identical. For courses with more than one competency to develop, or for courses that are part of a series of courses that develop a single competency, the design document is a bit more complex and new learning outcomes may have to be crafted. The Office of Academic Development supports departments in developing their course design document. Finally, at the course level, individual teachers create their course based on the course design document, adding their content, learning, and assessment activities. Let's take a deep dive into a competency analysis document. Some of the sections of the CAD are self-explanatory, and others require a little bit more background. Please allow me a minute to explain. CADs allow us to go from competencies as formulated in the ministerial devis to courses and assessment design. But how? The answer is found in translation. The Ministry of Education refers to Bloom's taxonomy to formulate the objectives and standards that describe each competency. Bloom's taxonomy was proposed by psychologist Benjamin Bloom in 1956 and revised in 2001 to provide a common language to discuss and exchange on learning and assessment. The graphic represents a hierarchical ordering of cognitive skills. There are other taxonomies used in education, but since our Ministry of Education uses Bloom in the majority of their devis, I will proceed with this example. This competency is at the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy, as can be identified by the verb analyze. Competencies are formulated as objectives and standards. The objectives are targets to be met by the student. The ultimate target is the exercise of the competency, analyze the thematic issue from a multidisciplinary perspective in the social sciences. The elements of the competencies are sub-objectives representing individual tasks or a cognitive process or procedure. They may also represent expected products. The objectives are written using Bloom's taxonomy as well. The verb used for each objective is aligned with the broad categories or cognitive domains of Bloom's taxonomy, and often teachers comment that the formulation is too vague to mean anything. I would say that rather than vague, the objectives are formulated in a general fashion so as to be applicable to a variety of situations, and in this case, to as many thematic issues as the program decides to take on in courses. So yes, the competencies as formulated are too broad to be observable. That is why we translate objectives and standards into observable learning outcomes. Competencies are formulated in the language of employers or what is expected of a graduate pursuing university studies. They are too general to be observable or to assess because they describe a graduate's ability to act in a variety of situations. For example, to analyze an issue related to the conflicts in the Middle East, or to a pandemic, or to artificial intelligence. The theme is different, but the competency is the same. Whereas a competency is in the language of employers or the universities, learning outcomes is the language of the educator. Learning outcomes are tied to assessment, and they describe what we expect students to do with what they have learned in the class. They are specific to situations and time-bound. The competency analysis document translates competencies to learning outcomes. So why would we develop learning outcomes rather than, or in addition to, writing competency statements along with its elements on a course outline or in a competency analysis document? We write learning outcomes to contextualize the exercise of a competency within our courses. That is, we want to make clear to students what is expected of them and hence what we will be assessing. When we analyze each ministerial competency, we translate these broad objectives into time-bound, specific, measurable statements reflecting what students will be able to do with what they have learned. The learning outcomes take the form of action verb, subject, and context. Let me give you an example of translating a competency to learning outcomes. This is a simplified example, so there's no elements or performance criteria. The competency is apply assessment methods. What these are, how they are applied, will be presented over several videos or workshops or courses. So the learning outcomes for this particular competency in this particular context is the following. After this and the next most exciting video ever, you should be able to write learning outcomes for a course in a program defined by competencies, implement an assessment strategy based on the desired learning outcomes. Let's examine whether these are effective learning outcomes based on the criteria explained in another video. Are these outcomes SMART? Are they specific? Are they informative? Will students understand what they mean and know what is expected of them? Are they measurable? Can you imagine an assessment to verify if students meet these outcomes? Are they achievable in the time expressed? If not, we may have to add more workshops, more videos, or an entire course. And are they relevant? Are they relevant to the development of the competency, either partially or fully? And are they time-bound? The STEM statement would have to be revised if these two outcomes are not achievable in the two videos, after watching two videos. The competency is ministerial speak. The learning outcomes is facilitator speak or teacher speak, and they are specific to my workshops or my series of workshops or to courses. Upon reflection, I may have to go back and check for the taxonomic level. Both the statements start with the action verbs write and implement, and these are at the application level, as is the competency, and therefore the learning outcomes are aligned with the taxonomic level of the competency. But after discussing it with colleagues, they were all in agreement that it will take a lot more than just two videos to be able to write learning outcomes and implement assessment strategies. And so the STEM statement was modified to add an in-person workshop. Whereas the Ministry of Education uses Bloom's taxonomy to write objectives and standards, teachers use verb tables to write learning outcomes. Instead of the broad or general categories represented in the graphic, teachers use verb tables to write learning outcomes. This table shows the alignment between the taxonomic level, the related learning verbs, and the assessments appropriate to the level at which we expect students to perform. Keep in mind that not all tables are created equal, and at times some of the suggestions may not be aligned with what you want your students to be able to do as a result of learning. You can Google verb tables that suggest other action verbs more appropriate to your discipline. We're now ready to examine a typical competency analysis document. Please note that these are suggested to your department and can be adapted depending on your needs. The Office of Academic Development is open to improvement suggestions. The Vision Writing Team will receive CADs pre-populated with the French and English translation of each competency. The English version may be unofficial at the time of writing and will need to be updated once the ministry sends us the official translation. This first page consists of 4 sections to be completed by the writing team and validated with the program. In the first section, the cluster in which the competency was grouped is indicated. In this case, the writers identify the competency as a professional skill. Next section, the writers indicate the terms in which the competency will be developed. Keep in mind that it's an initial hypothesis that may be modified later as the design of the program develops. In this example, the design team deemed that this competency will be developed over 3 different courses in 3 terms. The third section will be pre-populated should the ministerial program authors suggest the number of hours needed to develop this competency. The ministerial devis does not include the number of instructional hours for each competency in technical programs. Rather, this information was presented during the ministerial meetings that local program representatives may or may not have attended. The hours are used as a starting point for discussions. The writing committee can then modify these hours to meet local needs or expectations. Keep in mind that we're estimating the number of hours to develop this competency, and these are not course hours. In this example, the 90 hours suggested by the authors of the devis could imply 1 90-hour course, or 2 45-hour courses, or 10 courses with 9 hours. Given that the program wishes to develop the competency over 3 courses, and given that it takes at least 45 hours to develop a competency, the writers of this fictitious revision decided to allocate 180 hours to developing this competency. The next section is where the revision writers can briefly describe the competency development strategy. Will the competency be developed holistically or analytically, and why? The CAD includes a list of links to relevant videos explaining this. Briefly, in a holistic approach to developing a competency, the elements of the competency usually represent a procedure or a cognitive process. For example, plan the project, execute the project, verify the deliverables. You can't do one without the other. In a holistic approach, you want the student to exercise the competency integrally, all of the elements, in one course or in more courses than one. And you want to offer students many opportunities to practice, to exercise this competency in different situations, with different tasks or different levels of complexity. And you want to scaffold that complexity over the courses or over one course. And students are said to achieve the competency by the end of the learning period by meeting the mastery level learning outcomes. In an analytic type competency development strategy, each of the elements of the competency can be developed by different courses, each contributing to the student's knowledge and skills in different ways. Students achieve the competency when they meet the learning outcomes in all of the courses that develop the competency. This is called a piecemeal achievement because the elements are loosely related and they don't necessarily build up on each other. The next part of the CAD doesn't fit into one slide, so I will present it over two. On the left, in the black, you will find a copy-paste of the objectives and standards as found in the ministerial DV. This section will be pre-populated for you. The right and blue side will be blank for you to complete. The left column is where you will write a short paragraph synthesizing the competency statement, its elements and performance criteria, and the achievement context. You will describe the competency in the language of the occupation. Here, it happens to be the 3D production industry. On the right, you will list some application examples. That is, why, where, when is this competency exercised? You may pause the video to read more closely. These two columns will be validated with the program stakeholders and made available to departments that may want to contribute courses to the program. The description and the applications of the competency make clear what the development of the competency will entail. We now move on to the alignment table, where we will describe the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes that students will need to develop in order to exercise this competency. You will make sure that what you write aligns with each of the elements and performance criteria. The focus of this exercise is to translate each objective and performance criteria into the language of learning. Once again, you're not describing a course or its contents. You are explaining what the baggage of skills and knowledge students need to acquire to exercise the competency for entry level to the occupation. Should you find that other competencies will be needed or exercised at the same time as this competency, you can mention those links in the appropriate box. The column titled Mastery Level Learning Outcomes reflect the integration of learning, written in the language of the occupation for technical programs. When writing these, ask yourself, what will the student be able to do with what they've learned? What will require them to exercise the competency integrally at the performance level indicated by the performance criteria? And make sure you use the SMART criteria yourselves for writing these. The other column may or may not be necessary depending on if you wish to write introductory and intermediate level outcomes to be evaluated along the way of meeting the mastery level outcomes. These introductory and intermediate level outcomes can be assigned to different courses. The mastery level learning outcomes reflect what you can expect of students by the end of the learning period. If the 180 hours is split over 3 courses, these learning outcomes map to the end of the 3rd course. This is what you would expect of students once they have mastered the competency. I know that this is a lot to capture in one video and impossible to appropriate unless you actually practice developing a CAD. The Office of Academic Development is committed to supporting you in this analysis and in the production of the CADs, because it can be quite challenging as the documents are completed, discussed, iterated, and finalized before embarking on the matrix design. The Office of Academic Development will provide you with pre-populated CAD templates for each competency, some examples of CADs, and would be glad to present a workshop to the program committee and potential contributing disciplines on how CADs are completed, so that when it comes time to validate these documents, the faculty will be well informed. Thank you for your attention and stay tuned for the next presentation.